Okay, we're going to go through simple and compound interest. They're going to try to compare the two. So the major formula we need to remember for both, the one on the left is our simple interest. Okay, so here's our simple interest formula. And the one on the right is our compound interest formula. Now there is another one to go with simple, but we can figure out that information from this one formula. This way we only really have to memorize one. We have two different scenarios. In the first scenario, we're going to invest $1,000 at 5% per year for 5 years. Okay. In the second scenario, what we're going to do is we're going to invest $1,000 at 5% per year for 5 years, compounded quarterly, and this is going to change the amount of money we make. Okay, and this will refer to this formula, and this one will refer to this. Now we'll talk about the differences. A simple interest formula, all it does is figure out how much interest you make, and it continues to pay you that same amount no matter how much time has passed. So for instance, if I invest $100, if I invest $100 at 10%, how much money am I getting? $10. And if I do that for 10 years, all that means is I'm getting $10 per year for 10 years. Okay, so 10 times 10, $100. We're compounding. What it does is say we have the same idea, $100 at 10%. Oops, at 10%. After the first year, I'll have put in $10. I'll have earned $10 interest. So now I have $110 in the bank. And I take that amount, and I have to multiply it by 10. And that'll be like another $11. So then I'll be at $121, and then I multiply that by 10. So every year I earn more and more interest because I'm keeping the money in that account. Okay, so compounding earns us more interest than a simple interest formula. So now let's compare the two. Our simple interest formula, this A stands for the total amount of money we're going to make. The P stands for our principal. And principal is the amount of money you decide to invest. Okay. Multiply by 1. If you want to know what 1 is essentially calculating, keeping the original principal. 1 stands for 100%. 100% plus R, which is our interest rate, times T, which is the amount of time that's passed. I suppose we should write those on the side here, right? A is amount. P is principal. I can't remember if it's AL or LE. We'll leave it at that. R is our interest rate. And finally, T is the time that's passed. Okay? So, let's plug our values in. We want to figure out how much we're going to earn. Well, we're looking to solve for A. Our original principal, we said, was $100 or $1,000? $1,000. So we have $1,000 multiplied by 1 plus R is our interest rate, which is 5%. What is 5% as a decimal? Yeah, so our R is 0.05. And T is the amount of time that's passed. So because it's compounding yearly, we have to equate that to the number of years. What did we say? How many years was going into this? For 5 years. So we'll be getting 5% interest for 5 years. Okay? So we put these values together. This becomes 1,000 multiplied by 1 plus. We'll bring up a calculator here. And we're going to get 0.05 multiplied by 5. Okay. 0.025, so 0.025. When I add those together, I get 1.25. And then I need to multiply that by 1,000. Anyone know what that's going to be?
1250.
Okay. So, we've essentially, at the end of this 5 years, I have $1,250 in the bank. How do I figure out how much interest I've earned? Subtract it from what we originally had, right? This is our new amount. So because it was $1,250, I subtract that from the amount I invested. How much did I invest? That's right, we invested $1,000. We subtract how much money do we earn? 250. Okay, this is good because I want to show you how we technically built that. Remember, it was 5%. What is 5% of our $1,000? Anyone know? $50. Okay, and how long did we have $50 in that account for? How many years did we put that in? 5. So what's 50 times 5? 250. So we earn the same $50 every single year. There was no compounding going on. That's how we got to that amount. Okay? So this is going to be very different from our compound interest. We'll put our compound interest formula. A, which is amount, is the same, times P, 1 plus I, and N. Now these are two different formulas. A and P are still the same from before. A is the amount, P is the original principal. I is our interest rate over our compound period. So I actually calculate I. And N is our compound period times time, or usually they write years. Okay? So these two things, I and N, actually have to be calculated. So we have to go back up and look at what we were talking about. If you recall, we said we had a compound period quarterly. How many times does quarterly happen per year? 4. And we know we're dealing with years because they said we wanted to invest for 5 years, right? So our quarterly means the value of 4. So our C is the value of 4. So to solve what I is, what was our interest rate, our R? Yeah, it was 5%, which is the same from our simple interest. So I put it as a decimal, 0.05. And we have to calculate I. I is going to be a little different. We have 0.05 divided by 4 equals 0.0125. Now, what that means is 4 times a year, okay, this is 4 times a year, we're getting this interest rate, okay? And it's great because the more things compound, technically the more money we make. The idea of this is we've taken that 5% per year and we've broken it into the 4 different compounding sections. So technically, if I add this together or multiply this by 4, I get my 5%, so I know I'm making my 5%. But every quarter, I earn this much interest, and I have a little bit more money in the bank. So from quarter to quarter, I'm earning more interest on the little bit more money I have in the bank. In other words, it's accumulating quicker. The more compound periods, the more money I'm earning interest on. N is the number of time that passes. Number of time. So our C we know is 4. And how long are we investing for? 5 years. So how many times does this compound? 20 times, right? Because it's happening 4 times a year, right? Compounding 4 times a year for 5 years. That means we compound our interest 20 times over the life of this investment. That's what those numbers are saying. So now, once we've created them, we just have to strictly plug them into the formula. We originally invested $1,000. 1 plus 0.0125. Remember, that was our I. We figured it out here. And to the power of 20. So according to BEDMAS, we deal with our brackets first. 1.0125. And now I'm going to take this and put it to the power of 20 and then multiply by 1,000. So let's bring up our calculator. 1.0125 to the power of 20 equals, not that big of an increase. It's still 1.28, right? But I want you to think of this idea. 1.28. What's 0.28 as a percentage? 28%. Does anyone remember what our percentage was in the simple interest at the end? 1 point something. Let's scroll up and take a look. What was this value here?
1.25.
Yeah, essentially what this meant is we're taking 25% of $1,000, right? And we earned us 250. Well, in this case, with all of that compounding that was going on, it's closer to 28%. So even though I've invested in the same bank account, because it compounded interest, it's a little bit greater. So we'll multiply this by our 1,000. And I earned $1,282.03. So I got $1,282.03. Now, not a huge difference, right? How much interest did we earn? How can we calculate it? Oh, I wrote that with the wrong type of pen. $1,282.03. How do I figure out interest? That's right. We just subtract this from what we originally plugged in. So I earned $282.03 in interest. Now that's how much above our simple. Remember, simple was $250, so I earned $32.03 more than I had before. So just because we were able to compound, I earned more money. And the longer this happens, the greater that difference becomes. We earn more and more money compared to before.